So I noticed in the last video, I blocked most of the UI in Photoshop with a stupid video overlay, meaning you couldn't actually see half the things I was clicking on. So this time, I'm just going to quickly whip through all the different presets on the brush, and I'm not going to hide it with my face. So I'm going to hide this, and instead just go through the brush settings. Brush, tip, shape. You can start with a circle or whatever, or you can use one of the predefined kind of shapes. Or what you can do, so I'll just draw some random squiggle, like so. So say this is I want to make this my brush shape. I can go ahead and go edit and then define brush presets. Like so. And now I can draw that same shape over and over again. At the moment, it's pretty boring because it's just like a stamp. And, you know, we can change the angle, you know, flip, mirror, change the angle of it, and so on. The roundness, not really sure why you'd ever use that. I think if you're drawing italics or something, I don't know. And the spacing. So this is useful if you're drawing, if I do another one, if I do a shape like, let's do a circle. So say if I have a circle like so, I make this a brush shape. So let's go define brush presets, like so. And now if I change the spacing, I can do, you know, if you're making borders or something, or you wanted to draw, you know, circly border things, that spacing, now I can change it up a bit so they're overlapping, say. That then gives you this, you know, joined up effect. And you could, if I draw something like this, for instance, I draw like a chain link, and then I go edit, define brush preset. If I draw this, let's go change the size, change the spacing. So if I do, ready? But we've got a problem. And that is they're all facing the same way. So what we can do, if I go back to my brush, if I go into shape dynamics, and if I set the control of the angle to direction, now with this shape, you'll see, oops, it follows the line I'm drawing. So this can be, you know, useful for a number of things, but if you are doing chain link fences or something, and you want to do a stylized look, or barbed wire or whatever, that's pretty handy, you know. Shape dynamics. The most useful one when you're starting out, I guess, is using pen pressure for the size. So a bit like when you're using a fountain pen, or the harder you press, the bigger the line gets. So if I just increase this brush a bit. Now, I'm going to increase the hardness of the brush, but yeah, there you go. So when I press softly, I get a small line. When I press hard, I get a big line. And this is kind of useful if you want to just sketch things out, you know. It makes things it makes things a bit more organic looking, I suppose. Because if I turn it off, so turned off, you know, it's pretty boring. But if I turn it on, if I put it back on, yeah. If you don't have a drawing tablet, you can use this option. So I'll just fill that out again. So there's an option here called, if I do fade, oops, let's do. So if you're drawing with a mouse and you don't have pressure sensitivity, this kind of somewhat replicates that effect. But I just need to change the amount of steps. I do like 150 steps. You see the sort of size trails off. So it doesn't have quite the same effect. As in, you know, it won't sort of fade in and out. But, I mean, at a pinch, kind of works, I guess. So yeah, I mean, you don't need a tablet necessarily, but it does help because you can do a lot more stuff with it. And they're quite reasonably priced now. I mean, you don't necessarily need to go with a Wacom or whatever. You can buy it. What's that brand? If you can, have a shop around, because if you do have a tablet, it just gives you more control over pretty much everything in terms of, like, you know, not just the size, but if we carry on, we also have let's see, angle jitter. In this case, it doesn't make much difference. We'll just go. Well, let's just make this make a new brush preset. So say I've got this weird sort of shape here. I make a brush with this. Let's do define brush. If I start drawing with it, you can see, ugh, that looks horrible. So this is where the, let's go into the shape dynamics. Now, if I change this, I'll do the pen pressure again for the size. So the harder I press, the bigger the brush size gets. But also, what I want to do is go into angle jitter. And if I do like this, you can see the shape. It draws at random angles like so. With that alone, you can get like a kind of cool tinselly effect or something, you know, just, tinsel ropes or whatever. Now, what you can do is also have control on there. So do you remember, like before, when we did the chain thing? That's shape dynamics. That's the angle control, and then we can do flip XY jitter. And what this does, just what it says on the tin. So the brush will randomly flip, mirror itself. So you get more randomness. So you're not just rotating it, you're also flipping it as well. So then, you know, hopefully it sort of breaks things up a bit and makes it more random and a bit more natural looking. But yeah, so this brush projection thing takes the tilt of the stylus, if you have a really fancy one that does have tilt on it, and then, you know, it's a bit like, sort of changes the angle that the brush hits the paper. I don't think that works on this one, but yeah, if you have a slightly fancier tablet that does have tilt, because there's other, you got pen tilt and stuff on these other options here, which I don't have. Scattering, if I've got, all looks like ants. That's cool. All right, interesting. Oh, spiders. Just that could have been brilliant, just in time for Halloween. So you can kind of see what it's doing. So wherever my brush is, scatter, a bit like a shotgun, fires off those. Instead of placing them where my brush is, it sort of randomly offsets them from where I'm putting my brush, and then sort of gives this Jackson Pollock style sort of effect. And you can also, with this, increase the count of things it's scattering. If I just, whoops. So you can go crazy with it. So this is really good for I don't know, things like moss and foliage and stuff or whatever. So that's that. And then there's just more. Anytime you see jitter, that just means randomness. So and then this slider usually is how random it is. So if I take down the scatter, so the percentage here is the offset. So if I scatter like very low, like 40% or whatever, not a lot happening here. But if I crank that up to say 1000%, now you can see the whole screen. It's like the area, it's covering is much bigger. Moving swiftly on, and pick some random textures. Let's choose this one. So if I change this to multiply, what is it? Linear burn. But it effectively applies a pattern to the brush, and you can change, the brightness and stuff of that pattern. Now the one thing with this is the texture is almost fixed, which is a bit kind of annoying. Ideally, you'd want it to start from the where you place the brush or something. I don't know. You can do this texture each tip thing. The pattern itself is still, it's locked. It's like absolute positioning. It doesn't sort of change relative. So I mean, this can be good, I guess, if you're trying to do like, what's it called? Liechtenstein style, like, dot prints or something. Let's see, I've got one. Don't really use this too much because I find it easier to add the texture sort of on separate layers or something instead, rather than trying to incorporate it into the brush. But dual brush. Now this is interesting. So if I go back and add some dynamics and some scattering and stuff, if I get a dual brush and then add, let's see, another shape over the top, like these lines. And then let's just increase the spacing. Let's do this. What I should get, hopefully, so you can see here, so my previous brush is now masked by another brush on top, and because I'm overlaying the old brush underneath this, it gives like this sort of extra layer of texture and stuff. Let's go back to the tip shape. Let's see. Let's add more scatter, like so. There you go. All right, so now, we go back to the dual brush. If I change the size of this, like so, let's change it to let's do color dodge. It basically gives you more, there you go, look. We've managed to create like a wet paint brush. You're effectively with this, again, play with the blend modes and stuff. I mean, this is like a really rough and ready example, but yeah, you can do all kinds of really cool stuff, mixing and matching brush shapes and all this together and do some cool stuff. So color dynamics, if we did, let's see, red and blue, you can do this jitter thing where it sort of randomizes between those two colors, or again, you can do pen pressure. So when I press lightly, I get red, and when I press hard, I get blue. Oh, let's turn off the jitter, bear with. Right, like so, look, light pressure. And then I put heavy pressure, turns blue. So the harder I press, the more blue it goes. So very light pressure, and then like so. And then hue jitter, well, just again, anytime you see jitter, that just means randomness and stuff like that. I mean, I don't think anyone really uses this, to be fair. I don't know when you would use this, so I know I don't really have a use for it. So transfer is just like when you're using a pencil, and the harder you press it into the page, the darker the pencil gets. The same is true with transfer. So if you do turn the jitter down and have this fully on pen pressure, so then we light pressure, you can hardly see it, then heavy pressure, very bright lines. And this is good for shading, so if I'm drawing, shadows or something, I can just let's see, just lightly pressing on things. And if I want to do, like bright colors, just press really hard, then gently, So that's kind of good, if you're wanting to sort of you wanted to blend things together or whatever. This is a really handy thing to, probably one of the most useful things in terms of brush presets. And again, you can use fade instead. So if I'm using a mouse, so I switch to the mouse now, I can use the fade thing instead to sort of simulate pressure. It's not quite the same. So again, if you're wanting to do digital painting and stuff like that, then it is worth investing, even if it's whatever you can afford. They're usually like the entry level graphics tablets, about 30 quid or something, I think, and that will sort of get you started. And that will definitely have pressure. I mean, this one, I think, graphics tablets have different levels of pressure, and the fancier ones have pen tilt and all that kind of stuff. But this is just like a sort of regular one. So all I'm really working with here is pressure sensitivity, and for the most part, that's all you really need. That will get you by. So we saw before with the shape dynamics, if I combine the pressure and the shape dynamics, put that back on, pen pressure. So I get small sort of transparent strokes like that, with little pressure, like so. And then if I do big strokes with a lot of pressure, they're opaque. And that will get you by. Let's give it transfer. Flow, similar to opacity in a way. So these look kind of the same, right? So opacity with pen pressure does this. If I press down fully, completely opaque. Then if I light strokes, like so. Now, if I go turn off the opacity control, and then I change this to pen pressure for flow, what this does, it controls the opacity of the individual brush tip. So instead of this being one smooth transition over the entire brush stroke, the individual tips themselves have different opacity. So this, again, isn't much use with a fully round brush. This would make more sense if you had like a tip like this. That randomness in the opacity makes more sense. Brush pose, this is, we just write. So the other stuff. Let's just go with noise first. So when you have noise on, all it does is where there's, the fade at the edge of the brush, if I turn it off, you'll be able to see here, nice clean edge. If I put on noise, it just makes the edge a bit rougher. It is literally just like a noise overlay. Wet edges is a bit like watercolors, where it dries in the middle, and then when it dries, the pigment tends to go to the edge of the stroke, and this is quite an old effect now, so this is just Photoshop's way of, digitally simulating that. And depending on what you want to do, I mean, it can be quite useful if you're doing like sort of ghostly effects or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I don't really use it that much, I don't think. Because again, you can do stuff like, instead of that, you can actually do, if I turn off the wet edges now, I could do a stroke and then have much more control by doing blending options than like something like inner glow or something. So you can, you can achieve the same effect, with layer styles or something instead. So there's limited use for that, I guess. Build up is quite a useful thing that I don't know when they introduced it. It certainly didn't have it when I first was doing brush packs many years ago. And what build up does is, if you set your brush down somewhere and keep the pressure on, it will keep applying brush strokes in that spot, which is kind of handy. And if you have things like size, jitter, all the other sort of things, the randomization. Smoothing, I'm not sure what it does. I think smoothing just helps when you're making strokes. It kind of, especially if you're on a mouse or something, fixes things, I don't know. And I don't know what Protect Texture does. So there you go, just experiment, mess around with things, and then so the most useful ones are probably the shape dynamics and the transfer. Everything else you may not need to use ever, but definitely for control over things, do try and get yourself a cheap tablet, because drawing with a pen is so much easier than drawing with one of these. Until next time.